Presten. And before I toss it over to Danny, I wanted to just give everyone a few reminders for logistics. Is if you've got a question for the speaker, use the Q&A function in Zoom. And then if you want to chat with all the attendees or panelists or someone specifically, use the chat for that. That way we can make sure that we get all your questions answered by the speakers. So with that, I'll pass it over to Danny, who's going to talk to us about the future of work, how to thrive in a post-COVID-19 work world. You're still muted.
There we go. There's always that mute button. It had to happen to somebody. Glad that was me.
That's right.
Thanks very much, Sabrina. Appreciate you jumping in there and doing that intro. And then also is my wife, Christy Presten. So we'll do some quick intros here and talk about the subject a little bit. So real quick on the introduction front. So my name's Danny Presten. I'm the chief methodologist over at digital.ai, formerly known as CollabNet version 1. And then just having a lot of fun in that role where I get to help companies out with a lot of their process challenges. And so Christy, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. Christy Presten, certified Scrum Master, and having had dinner with Danny for the past 19 years, kind of feel like I'm almost officially an expert myself in all things Agile, but I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no doubt. I think there's like a special place in heaven reserved for the spouse of like an Agile coach, because you certainly have to like live through a bunch of pain. I mean, heck, you guys in the world of changing companies, all that kind of stuff. No, it's always feels like you're banging your head against a wall. As I was thinking about this talk, really where my thought was is I feel like a lot of us have been impacted by COVID-19. I mean, obviously all of us have been impacted, but some really, really significantly impacted. Like my wife, Christy, does a lot of freelance stuff, and like her workload's down to maybe a quarter of what it was, or her income's down to a quarter of what it was. And talking with a couple of you guys in communities of practice, things like that I'm run, I know a lot of people have been furloughed or laid off, and a lot of companies are just really struggling, trying to think through how to dig out of this. And so that was the motivation for the talk today, is just really be a help, offer some insights, and have a conversation together. So with that said, while me and Christy will probably be the ones like verbally talking, I'm really hoping that you guys chime in via chat or Q&A, and Sabrina, Tim, Chad, feel free to interrupt us if you see a question come in, just like you did with Doc, and like, it's totally awesome. I look forward to those questions. So I'm way more into having conversations. I think the hardest format to like, for me, is webinar format, where it's hard to have that. So Christy's going to be here. We'll hopefully have a conversation together, but I want you guys to know it'd be way better if you're a part of the conversation too. So with that said, let's jump in, and I want to just kind of unpack what the talk's about, kind of the bigger buckets that I want to get into, and you know, hopefully this will be relevant to find something for everyone. And I included a picture of the city of Atlanta skyline, just in case you've been locked away and forget what that looks like. So there you go. You can enjoy that as we go. So up front, I want to talk about the corporate outlook, what this means for companies. I think this is one of those things that, you know, it's going to take a couple weeks or a couple months to get into the situation we're into, but a lot longer to dig out of it. So I want to talk a little bit about that. The next thing I want to talk about is what are the implications for this as leaders in an org? And I'm using that term broadly. It's not just leadership or management, but I think anyone in the org can be a leader. And so I want to kind of paint some broad brushstrokes there, especially as we think about Agile, what this might mean for you.
Right.
On that.
And also about individuals too, that work for all these corporations and leaders.
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully there'll be something relevant for all of us as we try to weather this storm. So hopefully that's pretty interesting. If there's other places you want to explore, again, just feel free to hammer out that chat, and we will go for it. I have a little bit of a hard time like looking at the chat and all the different screens on here. So again, if anybody's monitoring that, just feel free to ping me if a cool question comes up, or even an uncool question. That'd be just fine too. So corporate outlook, loads of articles out there. And I think everybody's got some opinions, a lot of information just kind of hitting the radar there. And not all of it is positive. So what I wanted to do just real quick on this next slide is just kind of roll up where most people agree and really kind of lean on Mick Kirsten. He wrote a book, Project to Product, which is kind of predicting a transition into a digital age and some rapid changes happening with that. And I think if you kind of boil down a lot of the articles there, kind of giving a picture of what's happening, I think he does a great job kind of summarizing and encapsulating that. So basically the general thing that he's painting here is that there's a new digital age that has been ushering in since the 60s. And there's a point, a turning point that we're looking toward in the future. And we may be in that turning point now when things rapidly change. And coming on the backside of that, we see some significant changes in our landscape and companies. So basically there's winners and losers that come out of that.
So what exactly, hey, Danny, when you're talking about winners and losers, can you expound on that just a little bit and tell us a little bit what you mean by that?
Yeah. And so basically the gist of it is what Mick would go to say, which I think most people are already seeing, is that the winners, people like Amazon have been making investment in their digital presence for a while. And this trigger event, this massive stress on the system creates even more opportunity for them. So they become significant market dominant. So like the Amazons, the Alibabas, Microsofts of the world get even more market share as you think about the piece of the pie. And then companies that have not been investing in their digital presence are going to move into some significant troubles or maybe even extinction in that world. So that's kind of the general gist on that.
Wow. So if you're worried about being in the extinction category, how do you work towards becoming a winner? What does that look like?
Yeah, right. And it's no secret sauce, but these are a couple things I want to review through. And again, if you're hitting the internet for information, you'll see variations on these themes. Some lists would have all these, more of these, less of these, whatever, but they're kind of variations on a theme. And so basically where companies need to be today, like really, really super important, is complete transparency into what work is in your backlog. What's all the work defined that you're trying to flow through your system. The key there is not having invisible work. If you've been in my sphere of coaching ever, that's like one of those hills I kind of die on, because invisible work is work that can kind of lead to that death by 1,000 cuts. You're not able to get the most important things done because you've got all these little things that you can't even see taking up capacity.
Right.
So complete transparency is absolutely essential. Understanding how value flows through your system, mapping your value streams, what are all the pieces you need to get something done is a key theme. And you see this even emerging, that whole notion of business agility that's been a hot topic at conferences here lately. Is, I think if you kind of roll that together, it's a similar conversation. How does value flow through your entire business? It's not enough to look just at software development. How are your financial systems set up, and are they enabling the ability to pivot? The marketing group, all through every finger of the org, security, all that stuff plays in. So it's important to understand how value flows through your system, and then identifying those bottlenecks once you can see that. So just some quick stories, customers I've worked with where they thought they had complete transparency. It was really just transparency around probably 50% of what their software org was doing. As we got that better transparency, they realized, wow, man, there's a lot of stuff here that teams are working on that isn't a key organizational priority. And we're not getting stuff through. Their big problem that they brought me in to help was reducing the cycle time on their ability to deliver products to market. And as we went through and mapped their whole value stream end to end, really the whole company value stream, they had been making investment in developers, but not seeing that cycle time shorten. And they kept buying developers, hiring more developers, and not seeing it shorten. And we realized, well, a lot of the challenge was in a group of designers. They only had 2 designers that were kind of bottlenecking all the development. So they could invest in developers all day long and never improve their entire cycle time. So complete transparency, understanding how value flows, getting a sense of where the true bottlenecks are. And then that's when you can prioritize the highest value thing to either address the bottleneck or just the highest value thing in your backlog, stack rank it and work on that top one first, which really kind of bleeds into that next point of limiting work in process. So once here's the highest value thing, here's how that value is going to flow through our system, let's get that done first, get that to market, and then we can pivot on that.
Right. Okay. So I hear you, Danny, on this, and this is something that you've been talking about for years. And so this is really nothing new, right? This is not new information for all of us right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, if you came today and you're like, oh man, I'm looking for that fresh, new, novel idea, this is probably a little bit disappointing, because this is the exact same stuff that we would have said as Agile coaches or transformation kind of people in the industry to do, way back in 2011, as we started to, when I first started doing all this. This was kind of right where we started. And so back even beyond that, this is just basic keys to getting value out quicker, smaller increments of value, so you can pivot and chase the next most valuable thing in a world that's rapidly changing. I think the key differentiator here is that people just haven't had that burning platform to change. And so where you're seeing, news articles, blogs, and all that kind of stuff that are really just expounding old information, it's like, well, finally now we've got this platform to change. There's something that's really important. Industries have been hit hard, and so now it's becoming more important.
Right. So those that have been better prepared and have been doing Agile all along and understand that now the opportunity has presented itself, and so it's not just good luck that they're actually succeeding. It's actually, something that they've been preparing for all along.
Right on. Yeah. Like those winners that we talked about
Yeah.
are people who began that digital transformation years and years ago. And so now they're positioned to be able to take advantage for that. And then the people who actually need to wake up and respond are those that have been putting it off, or maybe halfway doing it, kind of piddling along with that. And it's time to wake up and really get serious about this.
Exactly. Very good. So who do you think has been hit the hardest at this point with COVID and everything that's going on? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think everybody's been hit to a degree, but the obvious ones, if you're in real estate, that's certainly an industry that's going to probably not emerge the exact same as it has been in the past. I don't know that bounces back the exact same. Travel industry, again, one of those that probably there's been shifts and cracks in that. You don't see, for a while that travel industry has been changing. No more travel agents, or not as many travel agents. Stuff like that has been happening for a while. I think that's a significant impact that begins to change. Energy industry, medical industry has been impacted too. I think one that's kind of near and dear to a lot of our hearts as we're kind of change agents, and I'm thinking about the Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, people in that kind of camp that are on this call. But I think training is probably never going to be the same again. Training's been getting more and more to be a commodity, and now that so much training's happening online, the barriers for entry to be a trainer are pretty low. And so, and the cost of your class is pretty low. So I don't know that we ever see the big classes again, that are public facing. I think those are always going to be just harder and harder to see. Any kind of stuff with big room planning. One of the customers I support, we just got done with their first remote PI planning, and 90% of the people said they actually preferred it to in person because they didn't have to travel halfway around the globe to get there. The leadership were pretty pumped because instead of a $75,000 event, it was like a $5,000 event. And so for them, they're talking about getting away from 4 PI plannings a year in person to 3 remote and maybe just 1 in person. So some of that, once you go down the road, it's hard to bring it back. So I think there'll be some changes in that. But basically, I think the most impacted companies are anyone that hasn't been investing in their digital presence. They don't have a roadmap for how they're going to become competitive in that area. Those folks are kind of caught off guard and are going to be seriously impacted in that. Cool. All right. Let me pause real quick and just hit the Q&A chat. Anything come in? I don't see anything lighting up my screen. All right, guys. Yeah, so we'll keep rocking along here. And if you do have a question or a thought, let me know. So this next section, what I really want to get into is just focusing in on what you can do as a leader in your org. And again, I'm defining leader pretty loosely. That's somebody who is able to influence somebody else and help them make one positive step forward. It's not just management, although it certainly should include management. Although, there's some managers that aren't really leaders. So anyway, that's kind of the general gist here. So the first thing I'd recommend as you're a leader, that this is the time to advance agility. Talking with several of you guys here at the conference, we've had some one-on-ones in the weeks prior to this. And I'm hearing a lot of good news for Agile. where it's a constant struggle for especially older legacy kind of minded organizations to have these really long planning horizons where it's like, what's the 5-year roadmap or the 3-year roadmap? And you don't see that. Leadership they're not asking for that right now. They're asking for what's the 3-month roadmap, because we don't know what's going to happen beyond that. And so planning horizons have finally shrunk, which is ushering in a little bit more healthy agility on that. Teams are finally being more inclusive, where you've always had those mixed teams where some people are remote, some people are in person, and it's often the in-person people kind of have this unfair advantage for like actually contributing to the team or getting a word in edgewise. And so now that everyone's remote, I've been kind of preaching that for a while, like let's all be on the same platform. Just try it. And well, they've suddenly had to try it, and it's working out where they're getting a lot more participation from the team. So that's like, wow, I can stop fighting that battle for just at least a little bit. And prioritization is happening in a big way, where organizations, I was talking with one the other day that had this cool feature, and they were just going to let it piddle along for a year, just spend a little bit of time on it, a lot of whip. And they realized that cool feature was the very one they needed to do to remain competitive in a world where you're not able to go into the retail store anymore. So they bumped it up to priority, limited whip, put that on there, and bang, 2 sprints later, they got that feature out in an MVP format to market. So this is the time to advance agility. And then I saw this meme yesterday, and I think there'll probably be some variations on that really are true. Who's leading the digital transformation in your company? You always hope it's someone in the C-suite, but right now, I think COVID-19 is leading that digital transformation. It's creating that need.
Yeah.
Look like
hey, Danny, we do have a quick question. Can I interject here?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Danny, do you find leaders are getting more feedback from teams?
Yeah, leaders are way more open to listening to teams. It feels like right now everybody's in this liminal situation, and I think people, who may not have had the highest kind of emotional intelligence. They've had a high IQ, but maybe their EQ was a little lacking. Now their EQ, they're like, okay, well, I do need to tap into that and understand what's going on at the team level. And especially as they're trying to bring about, more value, or, hey, we've got to pivot and work on this. They're leaning on the teams to help provide that direction. So I definitely think so as well. Awesome. Cool. So, hey,
keep the questions coming.
Yeah, thanks so much. Awesome. So this is a graph, and I've often heard like it's really important when you're doing one of these talks to have fancy looking graphs. So I tried to just check the box on this, but this is a Google word search on the word Agile. So not a huge value add here. But the big thing to say is that Agile is not going anywhere. Like over time, that's getting more and more searches and more interest. And I do work for Digital.ai. Did I mention that used to be CollabNet, who did the State of Agile survey. So don't tell anyone, but I had some early insights into the 14th State of Agile survey, which is coming out here shortly. And these are some metrics that companies are reporting, kind of latest, greatest news around how Agile is working for them. Hey, oh man, we recorded that. Hopefully the marketing department doesn't listen to it. Hold tight, guys. I didn't kill the cool themes there. But anyway, 57% of companies say as a result of doing Agile, or as a result of their digital Agile transformation, that they've increased team productivity. Well, what do you think? Is that on somebody's radar right now when they're trying to figure out how to get stuff done in a remote world? If we can increase team productivity, pretty important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And 40% say they can better manage distributed teams. Wow, that's so impressive, because I thought originally Agile, from what I've learned and everything, is better at face-to-face. It's always been, get together and be face-to-face. But distributed teams seems like they're killing it. So. Yeah,
in the original, Agile Manifesto, it was all about face-to-face is the best means of communication, which I think we'd all agree. But video technology has come along, and so that's easier to approximate. Right now I'm in my kind of basement studio. Christy is level above me up in the kids' homework room, and this is pretty much how we talk all the time, just via video. I don't hardly ever even go upstairs anymore. It's great, but no, seriously, it's getting a little bit easier to have that face-to-face approximation. But here's I think why we're better managing distributed teams in an Agile world. For those teams prior to COVID that were doing daily stand-ups, they had sprint planning where they talked about prioritization, got on the same page for the work coming up in that next little time box. and then followed up with a demo where the stakeholders from all over the org could see the progress they're making. When they went into self-isolation mode and suddenly they're doing that, they had the structure in place to remain that the healthy connectivity. Organizations that didn't have that, if you were just kind of doing less mature Scrum, maybe you're not having stand-ups or sprint plannings, or you're just kind of flailing. Once you get suddenly distributed, you didn't have those natural mechanisms in place for those communication channels. So I think that's a big win there. Speed to market, 56% say they've got better speed to market. Again, that's something we're all craving, as we're trying to figure out, how do I rearrange my roadmap that I had for 2020, knowing that a lot of those things aren't going to be happening anymore. And then 70% they can better manage changing priorities, which is key. Yeah, Christine, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, we do have a question, so I didn't know if this would be a good time to interject or not, but
yeah, jump on in.
Do you think Agile process will have some change due to COVID-19 from process perspective?
Yeah, now the Agile process is kind of this big, broad bucket. I think the core ceremonies are just getting even more traction. Like daily stand-ups are even more important. And I tell you, like, did you ever have, I guess most of us took a foreign language in high school, right? And so I studied French for like 3 years, and a year later, I finally met somebody that spoke French, and I had forgotten all those 3 years of study. And I've been noticing that with English lately, where it's like, I haven't been using a lot of my English vocabulary, and so it's important. So for me, daily stand-ups are even more important now. And I have 2 teams I'm supporting, or 2 teams I'm kind of on, and one with a customer and then one with the company I'm working for. And man, I look forward to those daily stand-ups. So that's not going away. If anything, you might find more frequent communications. And then your sprint planning, demo, retros, I think those are even more important. So at a team level, I'd say not a lot of changes on those ceremonies. Broader, I think there are some significant changes in automation around your DevOps pipeline, things like that. Companies are seeing where it's really critical to be able to invest in that automation infrastructure and things like that. So I think there's some positive wins that we've been hoping for that finally get traction. Look like you might have another question.
Yeah, we do. Are you up for another question? Could you share some of the tools we can use to better manage distributed teams, like whiteboards, or that was the example that was thrown out?
Yeah, have you heard of this product called version 1? I mean, it does solves all your problems for you. That's the way to go. So I would say, and there's a webinar I did. I'll try to throw it in here as well. That kind of gets into a lot of those different tools. But there's tools that you need to enable video conferencing, and right. I think we're all familiar with Zoom. We're on Zoom right now. That's kind of like the getting to be the industry standard of video conferencing tools. There's various ones that are better quality than others. GoToMeeting is I just can't figure out how to make that work for me. Google Hangouts, I've used a little bit of Sakoko, seems to work well in smaller kind of groups. Once you get a lot of people on video there, it has some troubles. But there's that category tools you've got to have. And so those are a few. Blue Jeans is another one that I have used. So a lot of varieties on that. And I'd say most of those have free trials. And so just, try them out and find which one you like, and then you can make that investment. I would not skimp on a video tool, especially if you have a significant remote deal. There's also just collaboration tools, what's your storage, how are you going to share files, all that kind of stuff. And then your IM tool, Slack, it seems to be like the market leader right now. Microsoft Teams has some mix of all that built in on that. And then you're going to need some kind of a work management tool. So that's your version 1, your Rally, your Jira, that kind of stuff. And I would say, as you get a bigger company, you're going to want something that scales really well and something that fits your team. And again, most of those have trials. You can try out, see which one you like, or understand what the pros and cons are of each. I really enjoy version 1. Obviously, I worked there, but I enjoyed it before I worked there. So there's that. Hopefully that was pretty close. And if you want to chat back and say that was scratching your itch or not, let me know.
And then we have another question here.
Yeah.
Without training executives and getting full upfront buy-in from leadership, in your opinion, what is the best way to start introducing business/organizational agility to a large global organization and start gaining momentum through results?
Man, that is great. And so let me bleed in right over here. So as a leader in your org, which I'm going to assume all of you could attain to that, you're going to be able to influence somebody in your sphere of man, there I go, losing English again, in your sphere of influence, right? So we want to advance agility. This is the time to do it, folks. Again, like there are certain times in history when, it's like the man machine, the moment, you all come together for just that right thing. And this is, to me, that opportunity for agility, especially business agility. And so the first thing I would do to that end, and it's kind of a great lead into this next point, is focus on outcomes. Doc, thanks so much for the talk earlier about velocity. That is not an outcome. So what? You got 50 points to sprint. What does that even mean? There's no business benefit to 50 points a sprint. So as I'm going through trying to say, hey, business, you need to make these changes, or here's some ways to do that, I'm really tying it into some outcome. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get something to production every single sprint? Or wouldn't it be nice if we could get something to production every single day? Here's how we could align to that. Or wouldn't it be nice if we had a clear visibility into what everybody in your org was doing, and we knew we were all working on the highest priority thing? So that's the key thing. Or even, wouldn't it be nice if we could get this product to market? Because I know there's revenue tied to it. So let's just hone in and do that. So I tend to be pretty scrappy. I'm not adherent to any single thou shalt do it the safe way or the less way, or Nexus or Scrum at Scale, or whatever your flavor of Agile is. I tend to be pretty scrappy and say, what's that business outcome we want? And then how do we need to organize to get that outcome on that? So I think a lot of those methodologies are great places to start. I have no problem with any of them. Our daughter, mine, Christy's daughter, Reagan, has learned to play piano. Her little piano is right over there. In that, she's starting out with sheet music. You could kind of see it on the keyboard. So she's learning how to play that sheet music note by note. I feel like a lot of those canned methodologies are that sheet music. Here's safe, play these notes, and you're going to get the song done. As you start to master that methodology, and as she masters that sheet music, she'll begin to interpret it different, maybe hold a note longer, or include a grace note, as she's walking up to the next note. And then eventually she's going to be good enough, it's like, hey, honey, the song's in the key of E, let's just jam. And so if you're starting out, find those outcomes. And if you need a path to get there, sheet music's a great way, like pull up safe or less or whatever you like. But then as you get going, be willing to experiment around the edges and find what works right for you and your particular org. That's the way I would do it. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, getting that traction with leaders, they're focused on outcomes. They have goals they have to meet. Tie whatever changes you're trying to make back to those goals and show how you can make progress. And that's going to be a big win for you. Any other questions come in while I was on that soliloquy?
No.
Okay. All right, cool.
Oh, wait, yes.
Yeah. The next thing here is really investing in people. And guys, I will tell you, people are struggling, right? This is not easy on anybody. We've all been impacted some way. Right now, my kids have been kind of muddling through school. I'm not sure exactly what kind of education they've been getting. I think it's pretty decent, but they're struggling just millions. And I know a lot of us that are providers for our households, where income's important, that's struggling, a lot of insecurity around that. And shoot, for me, I've got some parents that are aging, and I'm like, man, there's just a mental energy that I'm worried about them. They're not necessarily doing the safest thing and all that. And so this is a time when people are not productive units. I mean, people are never productive units, but investing in people, showing them concern is key. And you can do that just spending time with them, but also providing the tools they need to get done. So if you are a manager and your team's struggling with some kind of free version of Google Hangouts barely hanging along, this is a chance to invest in them and say, hey guys, let me buy you a couple of Zoom licenses to get through this or whatever. But truly being a servant leader that really cares about your people now that's friendships you're going to keep for a lifetime if you can do that now.
That is so good. Yeah. Hey, I do have a question for you. Danny, are you seeing any red flags about the health of your organization's agility during this time? And if so, could you respond to them?
Yeah, so specifically about digital.ai's agility, I guess is what they're asking. But let's kind of zoom back. So I think in every org, when you're put into a stressful situation is when the cracks show. So I had this heart attack back when I was 39, and about every year since then, they put me on a stress test. And the idea is to like push me to the limit with a doctor around so they can see where the cracks are, where the issues might be in a heart perspective. This is that situation. This is that stress test for your company. So this is when those cracks would begin to show. And in different companies, they're going to show different ways. But man, just remember, people are acting out of stress behavior now. A lot of people are stressed, and so just keep that in mind. Make sure that you've got that in the back of your mind as you're going through there. So specific things that I've seen that are a challenge. Any org with like a 3-year roadmap that's been banking on that and planning to gradually plot along toward that end has a significant problem with their agility anyway, and now it's even more true. So you're seeing people shorten that planning horizon. A lot of orgs that struggle to limit WIP are even struggling more now because there's so many things. It's almost like this panic behavior, and we need to work on everything all at once. Well, that's going to mean you get really nothing done. So you'll see those kind of cracks emerge, and that's where I'm saying, this idea of focusing on outcomes can really help you. Like, hey guys, let's think this through. What's the one thing we need to get to market today to really help this out? Let's focus on that. And to do that, we're going to have to really limit WIP and sprint planning. It's going to provide that wind in your sales to do a couple of those things. Hopefully that helps. Man, it's hard not seeing people and being able to respond there.
I have another question if you're ready for one.
Yeah, I think we got time.
Okay. So in your opinion, how safe are Agile jobs, Scrum Master, RTE, Agile Coach, etc., in this downturn economy? What are you seeing?
Yeah, great question. So I've heard about companies that are still hiring Agile coaches. I'm seeing that hasn't completely dried up, though several of my friends with coaching contracts have had some hours cut. And so it's kind of hit or miss on that one. I think as a whole, when you have a rapid economic downturn and companies are kind of bailing water, trying to figure out how to keep the ship afloat, any kind of contract role is they're usually the first to go. And so I've heard a lot of companies laying off contractors now. So that would, if you happen to be a contract Scrum Master, RTE, Agile Coach, or a contract anything right now, I think that can be a challenge. I think that will rebound as companies get going. So that's hang in there. It's going to get better because when you rapidly grow, contractors are the spot to go to fill in those gaps. As far as Scrum Masters, a lot of organizations will hire those directly, so it's a little bit safer. But again, if you've been Scrum Mastering a team of contractors, well, you might have a problem if that team's gone. Hiring right now across the board, I've just seen a major freeze on that. So again, my encouragement to you is if you're sending out resumes, trying to get traction, and you're not getting responses, a lot of people will interpret that as, oh man, I must be a loser. My resume stinks. This is not the time to make that interpretation. If it, maybe 9 months ago, if you weren't getting a reply, that might've been it when things were booming. But right now, it has, everybody's just frozen. One of the customers I support has had their best quarter in years, mainly because they've got a product that a lot of people need when you're working remote. And so, best quarter in years, and they are on a hiring freeze right now because they're unsure of what's going to happen next. They're unsure of where things are going to go. And so I would say everybody's feeling that across the board on that one. It's not just role specific.
Okay, very good. Are you ready for another question?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, cool. Regarding the web conference tools out there you talked about, i.e. Zoom, it seems to be a great industry web conferencing tool. What are your thoughts on the break room features it has for teams to collaborate, and how and when is it effective to use, and when is it good to use?
Yeah, so that breakout room part of Zoom, I've been using it for maybe more than a year. There's some things that I like about it, some things I don't. One of the things it's easy to randomly send people into rooms. So like if you're doing, hey, here's a topic, let's randomly brainstorm around it. And it doesn't matter who's in that room. It's super easy just to create, 3 rooms and send 5 people to each of those rooms, and off you go, have a good small talk. And it's easy to set a timer and bring them back in when you want to bring them back in. That's really easy. The part where I struggle is like sometimes when I'm doing training and I want to do breakout rooms, but I want it to be the same 5 people in the same room for that exercise. And I want to choose who those 5 people are. it's hard to rapidly say, all right, Team Broncos, you go to this room, and Team Scrum Dog Millionaires, you go to this room, if those teams have a roster. So it just depends on what you're doing. It's possible. It just takes a lot of clickiness to do it. One tool that I was using, just if you want to try something else, I think that's written by anonymous attendee. So whoever anonymous attendee is, if you want to try something else, Sakoko was one that has like physical rooms that's pretty easy to say, hey, everybody go to room A, the other group go to room B and have your conversation. So that seeing it graphically on a board made that pretty easy. Other things I've done that help out is just have a list of links, and you can call it whatever you want, room A or group A or whatever. And anyone who's supposed to go to group A, just, go to your wiki and click that link and it will send you to that particular Zoom session if that's the one you need to be in, or Google Hangouts, whatever your video conferencing tool of choice is. So there's a couple ways to do that. And I'd say just experiment with a lot of them. Trial and error is the way to go. All right, how are we doing on time? About 10 minutes left. So I'll click over here and talk for a little bit about individuals, and this isn't going to be like a super long soliloquy, but just some general handles here. So if you're in this and kind of struggling, and again, as I was talking with the planning committee, Sabrina, Tim, and Chad on this one, where my heart really was just, man, I want to help people get through this time and really have some handles they could do to help advance their career through this time. So these were a couple of things. And again, hopefully it's not dramatically underwhelming, but I think most of this is just reminders for you. And maybe it's a good time to be reminded of stuff. But the first thing I just challenge you to do in this time is empathize. And while it's easy to look inward at the challenges that you're personally facing and the way your world's changed, it's important to know everybody else's world is changing. And some people are impacted even more than you. Some people not as bad. It's kind of a mixed bag out there, but take a chance to get out of your shoes and get in somebody else's shoes and really empathize with them. And I think in doing that, you're going to find the less you have your eyes on yourself, the more you have your eyes on others, the happier you're going to become. And the big, I guess, a continued point on that is there's a lot of people who didn't have a big change. Like their whole world has been working remote 100% of the time. And so, they're like, well, finally everybody else gets to experience what I get to experience. They've even seen, friends kind of, posting to that end of like, man, it's finally you guys can kind of feel my pain on this. With that empathy, I just encourage you, there are some on our meeting today that are going to go back to work probably soon, or maybe already have. And you'll be back in that office environment while the remote people their world hasn't changed. They're still remote. And remember what it was like to be remote. Don't let that, lose your view there, and make sure you're including them in those meetings in a way that they can contribute. Make sure you're following up with them one-on-one. All those things that we're trying to do now to survive, continue to do that with them. Don't forget that lesson that we're learning here.
Great point. Yep. Same platform, keeping everyone on the same platform still.
As much as you can, I think it helps. I mean, there's no hard, fast rules on all that, but generally, if you want engagement, it's better be on a similar platform. Even today, me and Christy are able to riff at a higher level. We're not in the same room, but we're at least sharing video, and I can see her gestures, and everybody in the chat is riffing at a little bit less ability to jump in there. We're trying to make up for that by monitoring it, but if we really wanted everyone's engagement, we'd all be on a similar platform there. The second thing is, it's really time to dig in and master working remote. Even if you don't view this as part of your long-term future, it's time to learn how to, because you never know when you're going to be working remote again. I think the real estate industry is going to be in a tough position as people realize you can be productive outside of an office environment, and even more productive. There's a lot of statistics out there now where teams have actually gotten more productive because they're remote. So I think that's one of those things where you open Pandora's box, and it's going to be part of our reality. And so, do your digging. There's plenty of tools, resources available online. Again, I did that webinar a couple weeks ago on that subject, but there's a lot of other great content out there. But this is a time to get really good at remote tools and get used to, video calls, things like that. Figure out a working infrastructure in your house that's sustainable for enabling that remote work, and get, make that part of your bag of tricks there. The next little point here is just communicate. Again, nothing new here. Communication's critical, but I think it's even more critical now on that.
Yeah. So why is it more critical now than before? What's the big difference there? What do you think?
Yeah, great. I mean, communication is always important.
Sure. Yeah.
But I feel like now in a remote world, especially a suddenly remote world where,
Right.
people are not used to working in that environment. If you've been in a typical office environment, drop-bys are a pretty big part of your day. I don't know. I think I'm only now realizing how important all those drop-bys were just to keep people in the loop with what's going on. And so this is a critical time to continue to figure out how to make that communication happen. And especially, here's the reality. If you're worried about layoffs or downsizing, things like that, it's important to let people know what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then the last one is just networking and being intentional networking. So communication, I'm targeting that mainly internally, helping people understand what's going on in your world, how things are going, what you're working on, what are the cool things you've done. Networking is, I'm focusing that more external. And this is a great time to maintain and deepen connections with previous employers, finding some recruiters that you can really network with, help out, that kind of thing. And Christy, I feel like you're really good at networking, generally way better at it than I am. What are some ways that you kind of do that networking stuff?
Well, I don't really know that I'm that great at it, but it really just comes down to, for me, personally, just being intentional and writing people's names down, whether that's in a notebook or maybe it's a digital notebook like Evernote or just whatever, and keeping a running tab of those names and people that I've come in contact with or I've done business with prior to, and maybe in the past year or two, and gotten along with and started to build a rapport, but maybe we've lost touch. And so now would just be a great time to reach back out to those folks, just if anything, just that human connection and just saying, hey, how's it going? How are you doing during this time? How are you weathering these circumstances with COVID and all that? And, just keeping the network warm. I think we hear a lot of warming up your network whenever we're wanting to, maybe change companies or we've been downsized. And so now is the time to warm up my network. But I think just making that an intentional practice every single week, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. We're talking 5 or 10 minutes through email, text, a phone call, through LinkedIn, just making that soft touch out there with people that that's in a similar, like Agile, in the Agile space. So that would be my encouragement.
I think that slow drip is the key. It's when networking feels weird when you're reaching out is when you only reach out when you have a need.
Right.
And
it
so
doesn't feel genuine.
If you can, find a way to maintain those connections and also just, find value. I was thinking about this, read this article and was thinking about you, in doing that slow drip on and on. And so here's the key, folks, as we kind of round out. I think we're right up against the time bucket there.
We have a couple of questions too.
All of these things, just make one small positive step forward. You don't have to boil the ocean. Networking, just reach out to one person this week, or communicating, just find one person to schedule a one-on-one with, whatever. Master remote, same thing on that.